This is Outta Sunday morning on Fox Sports Radio, 98.9 FM at 1340 AM, flagship of the Vegas Golden Knights and sister station of Raiders Nation Radio. We are coming to you live from two different locations today. Me and our social media director, Spencer The Wiz Ostrovsky.
Nobody beats the Wiz. Nobody beats the Wiz.
We're at the Residential Bancorp headquarters in Henderson, Nevada, and producer Chris Magnum Chapman, who is also the locker room reporter for the Vegas Golden Knights radio network, is handling the duties back in the Fox Sports Residential Bancorp studio in Las Vegas. The reason for this, if you haven't paid attention to Fox for a while or any of the stations at Lotus, is because for just about 2.5 years now, the pandemic that began in March 2020 continues to keep us working remotely. I hear that might change soon, but I've heard that for a while, so let's wait and see. The show's also streaming on the LV Sports Network, and you can watch the show on Facebook Live and YouTube. The page is called Outta Line. That's Outtaline. Follow the show on Instagram and Twitter at Outta Line Fox LV. And since we are live, your calls and questions are welcome. The Fox Sports Residential Bancorp studio line is 702-876-1340.
Hi, this is Bubby, and it's time for What's on Tap.
What's on Tap, brought to you by title sponsor Residential Bancorp. Whether purchasing a new home or refinancing the home you already own, Residential Bancorp is the company to turn to for all your home financing needs. Residential Bancorp, funding America one neighborhood at a time. Call 702-964-5720 today to get information on all the home financing options available for you in the state of Nevada. On Tap, who'll be the Vegas Golden Knights goaltender in 2022. The Aces play their last regular season game, and an icon retires at Michelob Ultra Arena. Teams in the NFL and their quarterback situation, there's a few of them. I know Magnum's going to be interested in one after yesterday. Also, the Raiders do play their first regular season, I should say first preseason home game at Allegiant Stadium without two of probably their most prominent members. We'll talk about that. That is what's on tap if you are looking to buy a home or to refinance the home you currently own. Choose a company you can trust. Turn to Residential Bancorp, funding America one neighborhood at a time. Call 702-964-5720 for details on your home financing options today. And we're going to get right to it, guys. Let's get right to Nightcap because we've got some things to talk about.
Hockey players, as you know, are warriors. They don't give up. They come to play every game.
It's time for Nightcap, a cupful of the Vegas Golden Knights. From highlights to interviews to special events, the puck starts here.
The Vegas Golden Knights announced that starting goalie Robin Lehner will likely be out for the season. It was determined that he would require hip surgery with no timetable for his return. This leaves the Golden Knights without an NHL starting goalie. What do I mean by that? Well, Laurent Brossoit, last season's backup, is still on injured reserve. If Brossoit isn't ready to return when the season starts, they are left with Michael Hutchinson, who's only played 38 games in the NHL since 2016 and 2017 season. And, of course, Logan Thompson, who has a career total of 20 NHL games. Although Logan looked great last year, looked like he's ready to step up and be a full-time NHL goaltender. But is that as a starting goaltender that can lead a team that really is trying to be geared up to make a run at the Stanley Cup? Is he that guy that can play in 82 games? And obviously he won't play 82, but is he a guy that can play in 60 games and a postseason? Chris, before I bring in, I'm just going to say possibly looking around the NHL at goaltenders that might be available, because I think you want to look at grabbing one with experience. I think Logan Thompson should get the nod to start the season based on what he did for them last year. At least give the guy maybe an initial shot, but you got to have a quality goaltender that you know is proven in the NHL. A guy that I'm thinking of looking around, maybe the Montreal Canadiens, Jake Allen. He's got they've got three NHL signed goaltenders right now. And Carey Price has kind of said he doesn't want to play more than 50 games, but he feels really healthy. If he can be healthy going into next season, they can afford to get rid of a guy like Jake Allen, who also helps their salary cap situation.
Yeah, Jake Allen was a guy who Brian, I initially thought of. There's a couple different things with Jake Allen. The first thing I'll say is the one knock on Jake Allen is he's making $5 million a year. So I think if you're the Golden Knights, the question becomes, do you want to eat up all $5 million of Robin Lehner's salary that is going to go on LTIR on a goalie? The other question is Jake Allen good enough of a goalie to lead you to a Stanley Cup final? I think those are questions that only the Golden Knights front office can answer. I think Jake Allen is a good goalie. I think Jake Allen is fine. I don't think Jake Allen is the answer because I'm going to refer back to point one I made. As someone who tries to approach this objectively, I don't think that the Golden Knights will want to use all $5 million of Robin Lehner's salary that, as I mentioned, will be on LTIR on a goalie. A guy who kind of, and I don't know the dynamics of this situation, but I look at a team like Columbus. And Elvis Merzlikins, who is one of my favorite players in the league, I should throw that out there because the guy's he's a trip. He's a great guy, and he's a fun guy, and he's a good goalie. But their backup is Jonas Korpisalo, and he's a guy who they were really, really high on, but he's the backup, and he's cheap. And he was a free agent this year, and they only signed him to a 1-year deal. He's only making like $1.8 million. I wonder if that's a guy that the Golden Knights look at, because look, the reality, Brian, and you mentioned it, we don't know how long Lorenzo Swa is going to be out to start the season. We got a little bit of an inclination that he won't be ready for the start of camp. We don't have a time frame on his return. But the problem now becomes for the Golden Knights, that was a guy who, when you were looking at potential salary based on the play of Logan Thompson, when you were looking at this back in June or in April when the Golden Knights season ended, and you knew that they were going to be over the salary cap, Lorenzo Swa was a name that kind of jumped out as a possibility of being moved because he eats up $2.5 million, almost $2.5 million in your salary cap, and he's going to be the backup. And Logan Thompson proved last year that he can play in the NHL. So I think a lot of people, myself included, were kind of looking at going into this season with Robin Lehner as your number one and Logan Thompson as your number two. Well, obviously, things have changed dramatically since that end of the season press conference back in April, which seems like a lifetime ago. It's so weird that we haven't had the Golden Knights basically in almost 4 months. But, Brian, I look around the league. There's not a lot of names that jump out at me. Thomas Greiss is a name, possibly. Semyon Varlamov of the Islanders is another name. But, again, he's a guy who's going to, and maybe I have it backwards. Varlamov is the guy who's making $5 million. I'd have to double-check and see what Jake Allen is making. He may not be making $5 million. I may have been totally off on that. And I apologize if I had that right or wrong. But Semyon Varlamov is a guy who I think he's a top-class goalie. The problem is he was hurt a lot last year. And Jake Allen, for the record, $2.875 million. So that makes a world of difference in terms of what the Golden Knights would be able to do flexible-wise. So I guess all the points I made for Varlamov or for Allen would then apply to Jake or never mind. I'm all messed up. So long story short, Jake Allen is a possibility. I do like Varlamov better than Jake Allen. I think Varlamov is a guy who certainly has a capability of being a number one goalie in the NHL. Yep. He's only under contract for 1 more year. So the question would be, and I'll go back to my original point, is do you want all $5 million to go to your goalie? I don't know. I don't know if the Golden Knights want to play that game because I think they still have Nick Hague that needs to be re-signed. Yesterday they re-signed Jake Leschyshyn and Paul Cotter, but those are minor league deals. So that's not really going to factor too much into what the Golden Knights are doing. The real question, Brian, is how much cap space will they have left after they re-sign, or if they re-sign Nick Hague? I don't know. The question becomes, What do you want to do? Do you want to give the reins to Logan Thompson? Because I don't think Michael Hutchinson is going to be your number one goalie. Does this team feel confident that Logan Thompson, a guy who's played 20 games in the NHL, he's done very well in those games, but is he ready to handle the grind of a full-time number one NHL goalie on a perennial Stanley Cup contender? I can't answer that, Brian. I don't know. I like Logan Thompson. I will say that I think this team certainly needs to go out and get another established veteran goalie, because I don't think Michael Hutchinson is the answer, and quite frankly, I don't really think Laurent Brossoit is the answer either. What we saw of Laurent Brossoit last year, he had some moments where he looked really good, but for the most part, he looked like a backup goalie. If Logan Thompson is your guy and you tab him to be your guy, you are going to have to ride him through thick and thin when he hits that wall and he struggles a little bit, because there will be times, and he would be a rookie. Obviously he played last year, but in terms of beginning the season on an NHL roster and being there for all 82 games, this would be his first full season. If you tab him as your guy, you need to ride or die with Logan Thompson. And Brian, I don't really know if that's the direction the Golden Knights are going to go. If it's me, I'm going out and making a move to bring in a veteran goalie. Michael Hutchinson can be my goalie for the Silver Knights. Logan Thompson might be my guy, but I need an established backup if that's the decision I make. If you go out and get Korpisalo, then you have a goalie competition going into camp. Korpisalo is a guy who certainly could win that number one goalie job. And I think he's a guy with a change of scenery would do him well. The problem then becomes if you do trade for that guy, he's pretty young, he's only 26. If you do trade for that guy and he has an unbelievable season, then next year you have a problem, because you'll have three goalies, Robin Lehner, Logan Thompson, and then Korpisalo. Korpisalo would be a free agent. So that would create, if the guy plays out of his mind, then what do you do? I don't know what they're going to do. I have zero speculation. I will say this. The news on Robin Lehner, it came out of nowhere. Like, you're just sitting at your desk or whatever, or you're scrolling through your phone and you see the Golden Knights tweet out, Robin Lehner has hip surgery, will miss entire season. Whoa, hey, where did that come from? Like, we had zero inclination that there was even an issue with his hip. Like, when we talked to Kelly McCrimmon back when they re-signed Riley Smith, which was in early July, about a month ago, we had this press conference, and hey, what's the time frame on Robin Lehner? Well, it's going to be, close. We think he's going to be ready for camp. He's coming in for very soon to start rehabbing with the team and this and that. So you had zero inclination as a fan, as a media member, that there was even an issue. The big question that needs to be answered is, at what point did Robin Lehner know that he was going to require hip surgery, and at what point did the team know? Because if the team knew, and I will say this as objectively as possible, but if the team knew a month ago that Robin Lehner was going to have to require hip surgery, and there was a possibility that he wasn't going to play in the season, then the team dropped the ball, because they could have gone out at that point and not signed Michael Hutchinson and signed a guy like Halak, who I know is represented by Alan Walsh, but a guy who has history with Bruce Cassidy, Miroslav Halak, who is certainly a more than capable NHL goalie. He's with the Rangers. He's not leaving New York. When you deal, he's not going anywhere. He's going to be the backup to Igor Shesterkin. But if they knew back then, they dropped the ball, Brian, and they have a lot of explaining to do if that's the case.
Yeah, well, overall, the Golden Knights don't have any cap space available. They're in the negative by almost $6 million, but they did acquire Shane Weber's contract, as we knew from the Canadiens in the offseason for Dadonov. And this does allow them to have $7.8 million in cap relief with Weber on long-term injured reserve. As you said a couple weeks ago, Chris, he probably and very likely may never play in the NHL again. He's about done. But now that Lehner will be out for the season, his $5 million cap it can be put on the long-term injured reserve as well, leaving the Golden Knights with almost $13 million in cap space, which is more than enough room to take a contract like from the Habs with Allen's low contract, as you said, about 2.8 and change. Montreal could also add a guy like Joel Armia and his $3 million contract, or even Mike Hoffman and his $4.5 million contract. Hoffman's contract might be a little bit too high to work, but that all could work out. Then the Canadians, they have cap space issues of their own. And if they want to use a trade with Allen to get rid of a contract, that's an excellent way to do it. Since they are in a position to clear cap space, they won't want any more money coming back, or at least nothing high. If they can get Vegas to take Armia's contract, or even better for the Golden Knights, Paul Byron, it's an expiring contract, and he might be going on a long-term injured reserve. Then the Habs clear up enough space to sign their restricted free agents and have some wiggle room left over. They need around 4 to 4.5 million, I think it is, and they will have just over 6 million if they can swing a deal to move Armia or Byron with Allen. So it does make sense for them and for the Golden Knights to take a guy like Jake Allen, who I think would be a really good fit. You got him, and then, again, Logan Thompson with what he did last year. Logan Thompson, to know there's relief for him, I think that works out well, because I agree with you as well, Chris. I don't think Michael Hutchinson's the answer at all for this team. He just hasn't played a lot in the years he's been in the National Hockey League. All right, let's move on real quick, guys. I wanted to talk about the Aces. I want to say it is a big game all around today as they host the Seattle Storm to this afternoon in a little bit. They play the Seattle Storm I think it's at noon at Michelob Ultra Arena at Mandalay Bay. If you haven't seen an Aces game, man, I finally got to my first one. What a game I saw playing the Chicago Sky. Just an unbelievable game. And, Candace Parker, as good of a women's basketball player as there probably is in the world right now. And she probably poses as much of a problem for A'ja Wilson as anybody out there defensively. But the Aces led by almost double digits the entire game. And they were without De'Erica Hamby, who's probably out for all of the postseason. And yet, her 20-plus minutes a game were absorbed, and the Aces looked great. They've won 3 in a row now, where the Chicago Sky is going in different direction. They've lost 2 in a row, but you've got 2 teams right now at 25-10, and 1 team in the Sun that is the Connecticut Sun, which is 24-11. If they win today and both the Sky and the Aces lose, you'll have 3 teams tied with the best record in WNBA. And I don't know how it pans out, other than they've got a funky playoff format where 8 teams make the playoffs this year. 10 teams are still in the picture with 1 game to go, which is pretty crazy. And again, the Aces can finish as high as the number 1 seed, or I think maybe as low as the number 3 seed, depending on what happens today. So interesting game, and a huge game for the Storm too, because they've got the they have the Mystics, who are right on their tail, who could potentially get the 4th seed, knocking them to the 5th seed and taking away home court advantage. But the biggest thing about today's game, probably for the WNBA, for women's basketball, is Sue Bird is retiring. This will be her final regular season game. Of course, she plays for the Seattle Storm. So a huge game. It's sold out at T-Mobile Arena. If you can get tickets or get in, I strongly recommend you do. If not, definitely get something for the postseason. It's pretty cool when that place is packed. It gets loud. It gets exciting. They're throwing T-shirts. It's a good time, man. Check it out if you can. But it's going to be an interesting run, and the Aces have everything in place right now to win a WNBA title. Yes, they're going to miss De'Erica Hamby, but the bottom line is Kelsey Plum could be the MVP of the league this year. So could A'ja Wilson, and the improvement of Jackie Young this year, probably the best of any player in the WNBA from 2 years ago when she was drafted number 1, and everyone was saying, wow, that might not have been a good pick. She really struggled at first, but ever since she won that gold medal in the Olympics in the 3-on-3 games, along with Kelsey Plum, both of them have become the best backcourt together in the WNBA, and it's pretty cool to watch, and it's an exciting form of basketball. Spence, go ahead, man, and hit it. Let's get right to fact this.
Fact this. If you don't like the facts, take your ass back to bed. Fact this.
The Dallas Cowboys, 20, the 2021 season ended with a playoff loss to the San Francisco 49ers, a game in which the NFL's most penalized team was assessed 14 penalties. The total number of penalties in last night's preseason loss in Denver was 17. I know it's a preseason game, but this was a number Mike McCarthy's team never amassed last season, and it is the highest number of penalties by any team so far this preseason. The penalties were an issue across the board. Infractions committed by offense and defensive players, rookies and veterans, they all were screwing up. McCarthy has been criticized for his team's undisciplined play, and after last season, he vowed to prioritize avoiding penalties. He has emphasized the physical playing style, but one that doesn't cross the line so often. Improvement is not yet evident. Spencer, under McCarthy, the Cowboys went from 6-10 and third in the NFC East in his first season, and that was in 2020, and they improved to 12-5 and first in the NFC East in 2021, but lost at home to the San Francisco 49ers in the wild card round. What do you think Mike McCarthy's window is in Dallas, especially looking at the fact that this team over the past two seasons has been the most penalized team in the NFL? And one thing I'll say before I let you answer is, I don't know if penalties equate to poor play. You would think normally that's a really bad thing, but the four teams that are the most penalized teams over the past two seasons, the Cowboys, 266 penalties. I know Leo love my statistics. The Bills, 261 penalties. The Raiders, 260 penalties. And also the Cardinals, 260 penalties. You know one thing all four of those teams have in common? They all made the playoffs last year, but the only team with a playoff win was the Buffalo Bills, and they lost in the second round of the playoffs to the Kansas City Chiefs. But again, Jerry Jones is a guy that likes discipline, and more than ever, he likes winning. There's no way he's giving Mike McCarthy the leash he gave Jason Garrett, right?
Yeah, I agree with you. Sorry, I just had to grab that microphone. A little bit of a different setup today. The Cowboys are an interesting situation because I think a lot of these years they've benefited because everyone else in the division, I would say at least in the last 5 years, have been just really subpar, right? You're getting free wins a season. Obviously, not every single time, but when you look at Washington and you look at the Eagles after their Super Bowl run and the Giants, obviously, since Eli Manning's left, have done literally nothing. So I think the Cowboys have been the biggest beneficiaries of that. So when they go to the playoffs, they may have like an inflated record. And if you look at someone like the Raiders, especially this season, every single time they go into the year, it's like most of their division's great. And a lot of these other divisions are really good too, like the AFC North. But when you look on paper, when you look at the Cowboys on paper, they have, obviously one of the best offenses in the NFL. They have a top 10 tight end. They have 2 top 10 receivers. Their defense is pretty good. Micah Parsons obviously was like a pretty big thing that happened last year that they were excited for. I'm sure they, of course they drafted him, but on some level they did get lucky to get an all-pro like linebacker out of their first year. So we'll see what ends up happening. But I thought when they hired Mike McCarthy, it was such a lateral move. To go from, yes, Mike McCarthy does have a Super Bowl. Like, no one can doubt that. No one can take that away from him. And really, he's had a lot of success, but he's also had the benefit of inheriting some amazing teams, almost akin to John Gruden taking over Tampa Bay way back in the day. I've never seen an impressive team from him, especially getting one Super Bowl out of Aaron Rodgers on all those years, on all those great teams. Some of that could lay on Aaron Rodgers, but I think a lot of the blame also has to go on their head coach. We'll see what ends up happening this year, but it's going to be a little more difficult. Every single team in their division got significantly better. So I honestly do not expect a 12-win season. So if they go for 10 wins and go into the wild card round and get knocked out, is that the end of Mike McCarthy's job? Probably. It probably is.
Yeah, Spencer, I don't know if it is. And I mean, the reason I don't is because when you say it's a lateral move, how do you say a lateral move when you've got a guy like Mike McCarthy? Let's just look at the body of work. 15 seasons as an NFL head coach, 7 division titles, 4 conference championship games, and 1 Super Bowl victory. Man, That is a hell of a pedigree. I mean, when you look at the overall picture, okay, yes, he inherited Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers. I understand that, but you still have to win. He goes to Dallas, and you want to talk about completely turning the team around. 6-10 in his first season, third in the NFC East. Last year, 12-5, and again, losing in that first season, Dak Prescott. Now, 12-5, they win the NFC East, but they host San Francisco and they lose at home in the first round of the playoffs. A game that really, I think Jerry Jones and most of Dallas fans and even most of the media expected them to win that game. San Francisco did have success. They went on to lose to the Rams in the NFC Championship game, but again, Dallas couldn't get out of their own way with penalties. A lot of penalties in that NFC Championship game, as we know. We talked about that a little bit earlier. I think 14 penalties in that game. And then he turns around the very next game, a preseason game, 17 penalties. Again, we just said the four most penalized teams in the last 2 years did make the playoffs last year, but only one team had even moderate success in the postseason. Discipline is a huge part of this game. 17 penalties in a game. I don't give a crap if it's preseason. Spencer, that's god awful.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's not a great sign, especially when you harp on it. I think his biggest problem is not the conceptual part of the game. I think he has a really good game plan for a lot of these. It's just that he doesn't connect well with his players, because if you're committing all that penalties, of course, he's not the one committing them, right? He's not actually out there on the field, but it's indicative of your coaching style. It's indicative that maybe you're going a little too loose on your drills and that he's focusing on the wrong things. Because the thing about being a head coach is I think it's like the hardest job on the field, other than maybe being like a quarterback, because you're in charge of so much. You run so many things. You're in charge of over 60 people on the field at one time, and basically what the outcome is on you. You have to not only be able to game plan effectively, you have to be able to delegate effectively. And you also have to be like a friend, not a friend, but you have to be like a figure to these grown men who are making like hundreds of millions of dollars. And I think that over the years, that's been his biggest struggle. They've had the whole Ezekiel Elliott thing. It's just like the team structure doesn't seem to be in place for them to flourish. So like I said, I think this is going to be a really tough year for them. It's going to be the toughest year, because while they did essentially get slightly better, or I would say probably they stayed stagnant. Like when you want to look at the Eagles, they got AJ Brown. You want to look at the Giants, obviously they have like a head coach who isn't a special teams head coach. It was probably a step in the right direction, a great offensive coordinator from Buffalo. And then, Washington has at least a quarterback now. I know Carson Wentz isn't everyone's favorite quarterback, but I think he did have like a 27 touchdown to 5 interception ratio. It wasn't until the last 2 games that everyone really had the biggest problem with them. So if the Washington can steal a game from the Cowboys, if the Giants probably not could, you would expect the Eagles to, just because of the matchup and how good that they've gotten. When you put all those together, I mean, if they miss the playoffs, obviously he's gone. But I don't know if the wild card's enough for Dallas fans, because I don't know. Dallas hasn't done anything since the 80s anyways, but it's just the other part of this. And the last thing I'll say here is that it is the Cowboys. So there's always going to be an extra level of drama. If you look at if you look at Mike's body of work, and if he was played for the Raiders, if he played for the Jaguars and brought them to the playoffs and all these things, I think the fans would be a lot more receptive. But delusional Cowboys fans only want Super Bowls. And I think that you're just setting up any head coach for failure, especially a guy like Mike McCarthy, who has this moniker of not being very good in the playoffs.
Yeah, and, McCarthy had his issues with Aaron Rodgers, and, he's not really what you'd call a player's coach. And, I don't want to say Dak Prescott's a prima donna, because he's not. He's a hardworking guy that can definitely take a hit, big, strong, tough quarterback. But you got to find a way for discipline. And like I said, the penalties will be Jerry Jones's excuse for excusing Mike McCarthy if the Cowboys don't have success this year and don't follow this 12-4 season up with another playoff run. I mean, that's expected. And I think this year the Cowboys just aren't expected to make the playoffs. They're expected to probably win in the playoffs. So it's going to be interesting. I don't think McCarthy's fired at the end of this year. It's his 3rd season. But I think the leash is extremely short if the Cowboys don't have success this year. And then if they have a abysmal season, like win 6 games or something, yeah, he will probably be on the chopping block at the end of this year. I think Jerry Jones got such scrutiny for hanging on to Jason Garrett for so long. I don't know what his love affair was with Jason Garrett. I don't know what Jason Garrett had on Jerry Jones, or if Jerry Jones just is old. But amazing the leash that he gave to Jason Garrett, and I just don't see him ever doing that again as long as he's in control of the Dallas Cowboys. Listen, moving on. Speaking of the Dallas Cowboys, and we're talking about quarterbacks for a second ago. Look at me trying to segue into the talking about quarterbacks in the NFL. But there is some discussions about quarterbacks in the NFL. I'm going to start before I get to Magnum because I know he's probably chomping at the bit to talk about the Jets. We'll call it a spill yesterday because it was a non-contact injury to their quarterback. We'll talk about it in a minute, but starting with like the Pittsburgh Steelers, when you talk about quarterbacks, replacing a legend, if teams have had to do it, in the past, and Ben Roethlisberger, 2-time Super Bowl champion, I mean, without question, first ballot Hall of Famer. And now you replace him, and who are you going to replace him with? Are you going to replace him with Mitch Trubisky? Oof. 9 starts in his last, I think 9 starts last season he had. And, they moved right on from him and, without much of a problem, going with a second-year quarterback who I think there's a huge upside with Justin Fields. But again, Mitch Trubisky kicked him to the curb after he was a first-round draft pick. Kenny Pickett, I know they're really high on him. He had a good game yesterday against the Seahawks, 13 of 15, 95 yards, 2 touchdowns. Matter of fact, all 3 Steelers looked decent yesterday. Mason Rudolph was 9 for 15 with 93 yards and a touchdown. And Trubisky, 4 of 7, 63 yards and a touchdown. He started the game. I think they want to get Kenny Pickett in there as quickly as possible. My opinion, I don't think he will start the season as their QB. He might even be the 3rd string quarterback because Mason Rudolph has so much experience, but I think they really want to get him in class and get him moved up quickly. I'm going to go out on a limb right now, and I say there's no way game 9 that either Mason Rudolph or Mitch Trubisky are the starters unless Kenny Pickett gets hurt. I think by game 9 of the season, you're hearing that here, Kenny Pickett will be the starting quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's the heir apparent. Is he that good? Who knows, man? I mean, it's so hard to say. You got so many young guys taking the helm this year. So interesting to see what's going to happen with Trey Lance up in San Francisco. It's amazing, too. You got a guy that in 3 years has taken a team to 2 conference championship games and a Super Bowl, and they want him gone. But the problem with Jimmy G, he's a wild card. Every game he is going to do something to hurt your team. Jimmy, you need a quarterback, especially when you got a team like San Francisco with the weapons they have now. I mean, at the skill positions, you need a quarterback who is going to be a game manager, not a guy that's going to try to win the game unless you're a superstar. We all know that that is not the case with Jimmy Garoppolo. So, I think maybe Trey Lance, more athleticism, definitely really good outside of the pocket. Although Jimmy G, I always thought was an underrated running quarterback. But Trey Lance looks like if he can learn to throw a spiral properly every game and every pass, he looks like there's a big upside with him in San Francisco, and there's a reason they went out on the limb and drafted him so high last year. The team probably scratching your head the most, which is kind of funny when you talk about NFL quarterbacks. You look at the 2018 draft, the number 1 quarterback in the 2018 draft, Spencer, Baker Mayfield. The number 3 quarterback in the 2018 draft, Sam Darnold. Both trying right now to be the starting QB of the Carolina Panthers. Both are cast-offs from their former teams. I mean, Sam Darnold was going to be the savior of the Jets. And Baker Mayfield, man, got the Browns not only to the playoffs, but got a playoff win for the Browns. 2 years later, he's gone. He's out. They pick up Deshaun Watson, and who knows what's going to happen with him. Right now, a 6-game suspension, my guess, is going to turn into minimally a full season suspension, but we'll see. I mean, I just don't think Roger Goodell and the NFL can let it be a 6-game suspension. Spencer's got something to say about that. I'll let you talk about that, since we are talking about quarterbacks. But again, when it comes to Baker Mayfield, who started yesterday, 4 of 7, 45 yards, and in one drive, Sam Darnold went 2 of 3 for 16 yards, but did get a touchdown pass. I think the Panthers are in a lot of trouble with either one of those guys. I'm sorry. Don't look for Carolina to do anything special. Next year, my guess is they'll be shopping for another quarterback. Amazing when you've got 2 of the top 3 picks in an NFL draft only a few years removed, and neither one of them could be a starting quarterback in the league. That's pretty sad, but I think that's almost the case in New York. I think Baker Mayfield will end up getting the nod when it's all said and done, but God knows what he'll do. But Spencer, you rolled your eyes when I was talking about, when I was talking about the situation with the Browns and the Deshaun Watson situation and the 6-game suspension. Do you not feel that it's going to be probably a full season suspension when it's all said and done?
No, there's a few things I want to talk about when it comes to the Deshaun Watson situation. First of all, when the Browns said they did their due diligence when they first interviewed him, they were just lying. They were lying because now everything that's come out, Deshaun Watson has come out and apologized to the women that he offended. So
how sincere was that?
Yeah, not at all. But this is the real reason why I rolled my eyes thinking about Roger Goodell, because he hired this lady to make this decision. We all know that Roger Goodell, there was a long track record of him being essentially the worst commissioner of all the major sports leagues. Like, he was known, he let the Tom Brady thing happen, Deflategate and all the other cheating schemes with the Patriots. And then you came into Colin Kaepernick situation, and they say he fumbled the bag there too. This is what I believe is happening. I think he hired someone to give a light sentence that he knew would give a light sentence. That way he could come in, like in the Royal Rumble, the last one to come out in WWE Royal Rumble, like he's hot, and have this full game suspension, basically to cement himself as the new leaf best commissioner of all the major sports leagues. It feels like something straight out of WWE, but if anybody would do it, I honestly believe it's Roger Goodell. Oh, okay. And before I say that, a little bit of extra proof. You remember when it was like popular to boo him during the draft, right? Well, now, like when he had his first remote, and now every single draft afterwards, he wants the crowd to boo him. He's taken over his own narrative. He's like, yeah, you could boo me right now. Look, I've taken over. Nothing you can do can stop me. He loves the whole narrative part of it. I obviously have never met the guy and I can't confirm. It just seems like it from an outside perspective.
I can see where you're coming from, Spencer, and I'm not going to disagree with you on those things. Like I said, when it's all said and done, in my opinion, the apology, was it heartfelt? No, it was required. Okay. And number 2 is a 6-game suspension long enough when you have that many allegations, regardless of what's been proven to this point. Only a few of them have withdrawn their allegations. A lot of them are sticking to their guns, Spencer. Something really wrong is going on there. And the bottom line, I'm still amazed at this whole thing, and I'm amazed at how much money the Browns threw at Deshaun Watson after all that. It's kind of sickening to me. And if I was a Browns fan, which I wasn't, I'm not at all right now. That's really repulsive, man. That is. You just don't give that guy a contract. You got to let this whole thing sort itself out. And hey, I'll be the first one to apologize if it somehow comes out in the long run that he was innocent of this stuff. But come on, man. Over 20 allegations. Let's be realistic. Don't get your hopes up for that, Browns fans. Deshaun Watson, in my opinion, and probably in most experts' opinion, will not be under center in 2022 for the Cleveland Browns, other than what you saw very briefly in the preseason game. That'll be the end of him, and it should be. I'm going to leave it right there. Mags, I'll bring you in real quick before we wrap up the quarterback conversation. Zach Wilson is to undergo right knee arthroscopic surgery for a bone bruise and a partially torn meniscus that he suffered against the Eagles yesterday in a non-contact injury. I saw it. He went down. The turf monster got up and bit him. He's only expected to be out 2 to 4 weeks. But I know you're not 100% sold on Zach Wilson anyway, but this poses a problem for the New York Jets, because one thing is for damn sure, in my opinion, the guy that I'm pretty sure they're going to turn to is Joe Flacco. And Joe Flacco isn't leading the New York Jets out of a wet paper bag.
No, but it's funny. He's been with the organization now. I think this is his second tenure, because he was there 2 years ago before they drafted Wilson. I think they let him walk. He went to the Eagles. The Eagles released him. I think he came back to the Jets. So I will say this. I think Joe Flacco is an adequate backup quarterback. By all accounts, he's looked pretty good in camp. It's a totally different animal when you get out there and you're facing the Baltimore Ravens in week 1, a franchise that Joe Flacco knows quite well. When I saw the Wilson stuff on Friday night, my heart sunk, because I'm obviously rooting for this kid. It's just another in the long line. And, it's funny. You and I had a conversation the other day. We talked for a long, lengthy bit about how cursed the Detroit Lions are. And the New York Jets are right behind them. I will say this, at least my team has won a Super Bowl. Unfortunately for me, I was not even thought of at the time. My father was getting ready to ship off to Vietnam when the Jets were winning a Super Bowl. So that tells you how long ago that was. But, Brian, it's quite depressing because it just seems like this is a franchise just snake bitten. Zach Wilson, by all accounts, looked pretty good in camp. He did not look very good in that first little bit of action he had. Thank goodness it's not a major serious season-ending injury because they already lost Mekhi Becton, who was there. I think he was on the all-rookie team 2 years ago when he was a rookie. He blew out his knee last year in game one, missed all of last season. He's done this season before the Jets even take a real snap. So already the monster of the curse bites the New York Jets. But fortunately, Zach Wilson, not going to be a serious injury. I doubt he plays week one against the Ravens, which is fine. Let Joe Flacco go out there and throw it around. And who knows, maybe there'll be a little bit of a revenge game for Flacco against the Ravens. We don't know. But, it could have been much, much worse. And unfortunately, it's not. But, anytime you have a young quarterback and he's not able to participate in a full training camp, it just seems like it's going to set him back.
Yeah, I can't argue with it, Mags. And I will say that there is a slight amount of empathy from this Detroit Lions fan for the New York Jets. You guys have had some definitely negative things happen over the years, like the Detroit Lions. I mean, even though Mark Sanchez did take you to 2 AFC championship games, he'll always be remembered for the butt fumble. So that's something that you have on your resume. But I will say this, and the reason I only have a slight amount of empathy, because even though that Super Bowl was before you were thought, I was on earth when that happened. I don't remember it by any means, but I do remember Joe Willie Namath, who played into me almost going to junior high school. And what I will say is the Jets are the reason the NFL is what it is today because of that win over the mighty Colts. And Joe Namath, I won't say cocky prediction. It was a confident prediction. I've never thought it was cocky. I thought it was excellent, and it did wonders for the NFL. But again, by beating the mighty Colts in Super Bowl III, the NFL merged with the AFL and formed what is today the National Football League. So even though it was only one Super Bowl win, it was one of the most iconic, if not the most iconic of all Super Bowl wins, because what transpired because of that victory for the Jets. And again, Joe Namath, I mean, kids today, if you say the word Joe Namath, they still know who he is. And I mean, Joe Namath is probably still, I don't want to say probably, he's without question more famous than Bart Starr, who won the first 2 Super Bowls. So Joe Willie and that Super Bowl win was so iconic that's why the empathy is only slight, but no question about it. Right now, the Jets are in worse shape than the Detroit Lions as far as the actual team goes. But I'm not going to say they're in worse shape as far as a franchise goes in the history of sports. The Detroit Lions are still the most inept sports franchise in all of the world. And until they win another couple of playoff games, I will continue to stand on that, because my guess is I'm going to leave this planet and I won't even see that team play let alone maybe even win another playoff game. Sickening. We'll move on. We got a huge game today. And when I say it's a huge game because it is the start of a new era for the Raiders. They are coming off of, I don't want to say a tumultuous season, because it's a season that saw them go to the playoffs and stand toe-to-toe with the defending AFC champion Cincinnati Bengals. They did on the road. They probably played, other than the Rams, Cincinnati, as well as anybody that played them did in the postseason. They definitely played them better than the Tennessee Titans did. So you want to give credit where credit is due. The Raiders played well last season, but wholehearted changes, as we know, and new head coach, one of the top wide receivers in the game. There's no question. You cannot argue as far as skilled position goes. The Raiders have an above-average quarterback. They have arguably a top 3 wide receiver in the National Football League in Devontae Adams. They have an arguably top 3 slot wide receiver in the National Football League in Hunter Renfrow. They've got arguably a top 3 to 4 tight end in the National Football League in Darren Waller. So, and then look at the running back situation. I mean, you're talking about a running back now that is a two-way running back, a guy that can catch the ball out of the backfield and also run the football on the edge and up the power alleys in Josh Jacobs. If he can stay healthy, he has all pro potential written all over him. You've got backups in Kenyon Drake and now the other Lions running back, Amir Abdullah. So you are really deep at the running back position. Skilled as can be at the wide receiver and tight end position. Your quarterback is adequate. No question. The offensive line is a big question mark. Probably the reason that Derek Carr and Devontae Adams aren't seeing any time in the first 2 preseason games. But the bottom line is that other than the offensive line, the offense is solid. Defensively, your edge pass rushers, top 3 when you put the 2 of them together right now. How do you argue with that? Max Crosby's been nothing but a complete beast so far in preseason. We'll see what he does today. He's not going to get a lot of time in this game, but he will play. And then linebacker Denzel Perryman ends up in the Pro Bowl last year, comes into his own coming over from Carolina. Huge upside. The guy can stop the run and play the pass. The secondary, I know you have question marks on the secondary, but Abrams has gotten better and better every year. I know he has coverage problems. I know he makes a few mistakes out there, but he is a hard-hitting defensive back. People don't like coming across the middle when you stand there because he will light you up. They do have some decent depth, maybe not depth in the secondary, but some veteran experience. I like this Raiders team, and I expect this Raiders team to be a postseason team, regardless of the fact they are playing in the toughest division in football. And what's crazy, we talked about it a little bit last week on the show, but the odds makers have them at plus 4,000 to win the Super Bowl. And those are the worst odds of any team in the AFC West. The Broncos are ahead of them at plus 1,800. And it's really surprising. And of course, you knew the Chiefs and the Chargers, both viable Super Bowl contenders right now, even though the Chiefs lost Tyreek Hill, that is still a veteran team that has as much postseason experience as anybody out there. Spencer, I like the Raiders this year. I do. I think this is a team that can get over the hump. Yes, McDaniels is a question mark a little bit, but you've seen offensive coordinators have more success in the NFL underneath Bill Belichick than defensive coordinators coming from New England. I like the fit all the way around right now, and it seemed like the Raiders are really warming up to their new head coach. And again, wait till we get to see Derek Carr and Devontae Adams, who are not only best of friends, they played in college together, and there is a great deal of chemistry between these two guys. They work out together during the offseason. They have throughout their 5-year NFL careers. I look for both of these guys to step up their game even more this year. And the big thing to me is going to be, can this offensive line protect Derek Carr? If they can, Spencer, if they can give him a 3-second window to throw the ball, the sky's the limit for the Raiders. I do believe that.
It should be, and this is the most important year in Derek Carr's career. So they went to the playoffs last year, and the team got better. So on paper, yes. I've been talking about this every week about how much better every other team in the division has gotten, which is unfortunate. Seems to be the luck of the Raiders. This is the best team they've had since 2003, bar none. There's nothing even really close. I guess you could maybe look at the Jason Campbell 2010 teams, which were fairly good, but never had a star receiver. Haven't had a star receiver since Tim Brown and Jerry Rice, laced up in 2003. Randy Moss maybe for that 1 year, but other than that, it's been pretty rough. In terms of just star players in general, the Raiders organization, you could look back at Richard Seymour maybe back in the day, and Nnamdi Asomugha. My Raiders knowledge from the most obscure teams is sickening, but you look down top to bottom, there's a lot of great skill. There's a lot of top tier. There's a lot of all pro potential. Chandler Jones, Max Crosby, Darren Waller, Devontae Adams. I mean, I can't think of the last time the Raiders had 2 all-pro players on their team at the same time.
Renfrow made it last year.
Yeah.
Wow, how can he not be an all-pro again?
So, I mean, I'm not going to say the season's over or done with, depending on week 1, but the way that the Raiders looked against top-tier talent against the Chargers in week 1, and they'll probably get better as the year goes on, but that's going to tell me, I feel like, everything that I need to know. They have been dominated by the Chiefs for the past like 3 years. They haven't had a win against them. Or no, maybe they've had like one. But most of the time, and especially last year, there was literally a scoregami. The Chiefs beat the Raiders so bad. They beat them so bad there was a unique score that had never happened in the NFL prior. I don't know if Chandler Jones and Max Crosby are going to be the answer to that. But again, if the Raiders are truly going to get over the hump, that's what needs to happen. I think I talked about this last week in something that is at least an encouraging sign, okay? Because you're never going to take away anything from the preseason in terms of like how good of a team is. But they did go into the Hall of Fame game extremely prepared. And when you look at it, and they seem to be running things pretty smartly, because when you look at the backup quarterbacks, is he the best backup quarterback in the NFL? No. But he stepped into camp when they traded for him, like for a 6th-round pick. And he's giving everybody on the team valuable reps. Because if you look at Nick Mullins, he actually had a pretty decent game there in that week 1. But when you look at a lot of situations around the NFL, they bring in veteran quarterbacks like, Case Keenum or whatever the case may be, who are talented, right? They're talented backups, but they don't know the system and they're getting second-team reps. Jared came in and he's getting better reps. There was a kid, I think his name was like Chris Johnson or Johnson, I think was his last name for the Raiders in that first preseason game, had a lot of good catches. But that's only because they had a quarterback throwing to him that knew exactly where he was going to be. Like he could run the offense week 1. He could have the day he stepped into camp because he knew where all his players are. Of course, there's a little bit of timing when it comes to receivers, but more importantly, if the quarterback knows your system. So they seem to be doing things from top to bottom in ways that I like. Again, I talked about the secondary, very nervous. Okay. Like they got to have some guys step up, like Nate Hobbs more than he probably should have to. Then you're going to have some guys like Jayon Brown, who's had some injury problems with the linebacker position, replace KJ Wright, who had an amazing season last year, trying to replace Casey Hayward. All of these things are going to be a factor. And when I see on the depth chart, though, that Jonathan Abrams is still the starting safety, it makes me nervous, okay? If nobody can outperform Jonathan Abrams at the safety position in training camp, then I think we're off to the wrong foot. Look, everybody's on their last year, so this is probably going to be the best year of Josh Jacobs' career, of Jonathan Abrams' career, which is probably a good thing. I still don't know if they're going to be on the team next year, but man, I do not want Jonathan Abrams starting at safety. I feel like that's a really disaster. Every time I think about Jonathan Abrams, the only thing I can think of is one play he had against the Kansas City Chiefs, where he was supposed to be the deep middle zone, and he decided to play up short in the middle. And Travis Kelce just had a wide open touchdown down the middle, and he looked like he had no idea what had just happened, Jonathan Abrams, even though that was his zone. So, the season obviously is so young. I want to see him play more in the preseason and see what he looks like, but I don't know. He came in so deficient, Jonathan Abrams, in terms of his skill, not his motor, his skill, that I don't know if you can learn that fast in the NFL. That's how hard the game is. The Raiders may be looking elsewhere next year in the first round, I'm pretty sure.
I am going to go out on a limb and say Jonathan Abrams is going to have his best year as a Raider. What does that mean? Well, we'll see, but I think he's going to play better this year. As a safety, and again, because he does lay the lumber, he is a hard-hitting defensive back, and physicality can go a long way, and I think it works well for the Raiders team. Real quickly, Kevin O'Connell is set for his first preseason game with the Vikings. The last team to take the field in the preseason will be the Vikings today at Allegiant Stadium. Kirk Cousins won't play. He's out with COVID-19. So Kellen Mond and Sean Mannion are competing for the backup spot. Both have had their ups and downs in training camp, and if neither is able to establish himself in the preseason, it is possible the Vikings will have to find a backup elsewhere before the season begins. So it'll be interesting to see the Vikings. I have no problem when the Vikings suck because I can't stand them, and I think they'll suck this year. And it's amazing because Kirk Cousins, of course, a QB at my alma mater, Michigan State, and I don't like the guy at all. I never have. He's the recipient of RG3 getting hurt his first year. He got to step in, and he's been at times at best an above average quarterback that I think talks too much. But then again, people say I talk too much. So, what are you going to say? Real quickly, before we run out of time, I did want to say the Las Vegas Aviators, after going 4-19 in their last 23 games, Jim Gemmaman has been beside himself. The Las Vegas Aviators, AAA franchise of the Oakland A's, have won their last 3 in a row and finish up a 7-game set in Tacoma today before heading to Sacramento for 3 games. They return to the Las Vegas ballpark this coming Friday. I believe it's a firework night. They'll be in town for 9 games, 6 versus Sacramento, and then 3 versus one of my favorite team names, the Sugarland Space Cowboys. I love that name. And they've got 3 games against them. And again, if you haven't been down to the Las Vegas ballpark, people, definitely check it out. Once again, the Raiders take the field this afternoon, 1:25 kickoff time here in Las Vegas at Allegiant Stadium. And of course, the Aces at noon today at Michelob Ultra Arena, playing in their final regular season game, a chance to end up with the best record in the WNBA, and the number 1 seed out of the 8 teams will make it. That would be huge. And again, Sue Bird retires today at Michelob Ultra Arena. Listen, want to thank everyone for joining the show. I'm going to work on getting Chet, getting the Wiz a new shirt for next week. I know we could see all of your little fuzz going on here. It's just a little bit of bacon, a little bit of bacon neck with your shirt, though. It's hanging a little low today. So I'm going to get him a nice new Fox Sports t-shirt to wear next week. I'm teasing. Anyways, I want to thank Spencer for being here, helping out. Of course, Magnum back in the Fox Sports Residential Bancorp studio, always doing a great job back there. I'm Brian Feldman. We will be back on same time, same place next week, Sunday mornings, 8 o'clock. Every Sunday here on Fox Sports Radio, 98.9 FM, 1340 AM, flagship of the Vegas Golden Knights and sister station of Raiders Nation Radio. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.